The moment 5 alien commanders saw humanity's battleship, their jaws dropped and the entire room went silent, because what they witnessed was beyond anything they had imagined in their 1,000 years of space warfare. Today I'm going to tell you the story of how humanity joined the Galactic Council, not through diplomacy, not through begging, but by showing up with technology so advanced that species who had ruled the galaxy for millennia suddenly realized they were no longer the apex predators. This is the story of the day Earth stopped being underestimated, and it all started when one human commander walked into a room full of aliens who thought humans were nothing more than primitive newcomers who got lucky with faster-than-light travel. Space Station Unity hung in the darkness of space like a massive silver wheel spinning slowly against a backdrop of colorful nebula clouds. The station had been built 3,000 years ago as neutral ground where the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy could meet without fear of ambush or war. Its rotating rings caught the light from the nearby star system and sent brilliant reflections dancing across the polished metal surface that made up its outer hull. Every 100 years the Galactic Council hosted a special event here called the Military Showcase, where each major power demonstrated their latest warships and weapon systems to maintain what they called the balance of power through mutual respect and healthy fear. This year marked a historic first because for the very first time since the summit began 10,000 years ago, humanity had been invited to attend. The invitation had caused quite a stir among the established powers. Admiral Vex stood by the observation window in the station's main reception hall adjusting his formal military sash with 3 of his 7 fingers. He was tall even by his species standards, reaching nearly 8 feet in height, and his skin shifted colors constantly between shades of blue-gray and deep purple depending on his emotional state. Right now it was cycling through darker shades, which meant he was annoyed. His 3 eyes arranged in a triangular pattern on his face blinked one after another in sequence as he watched ships from various civilizations dock at the station's many ports. I still think inviting the humans was a mistake, he muttered to his companion, his voice carrying a slight hissing quality that his translator converted into standard galactic speech. The council voted on it fair and square, replied Battlemaster Tora, who stood beside him examining her reflection in the window. Her massive frame was covered in thick red scales that looked like they could deflect bullets, and her 4 muscular arms were crossed over her broad chest. She was from the Krell species known throughout the galaxy as the fiercest warriors, and she commanded the largest battleship ever built. Humans have had faster-than-light travel for 30 years now. Tora continued, the rules clearly state that any species achieving FTL capability automatically qualifies for an invitation to the summit. Vex made a dismissive gesture with one of his hands, causing the ceremonial rings on his fingers to clink together softly. Rules can be bent when necessary, especially for species who clearly aren't ready for this level of interaction. What could they possibly have to show us? Their ships are like toys compared to ours. I've seen their vessels in the intelligence reports, their primitive designs barely capable of crossing their own star system, let alone projecting real military power across the galaxy. Tora shrugged her 4 shoulders in a rippling motion that made her look even more imposing. Maybe that's exactly why we should let them attend. Let them see what real military power looks like. Maybe it will teach them some humility and convince them to stay in their corner of space where they belong. Across the enormous reception hall, which was decorated with banners and flags from hundreds of different civilizations, 3 other military commanders were having similar conversations. Chief Strategist Mech, whose body resembled a giant praying mantis with metallic green exoskeleton and compound eyes that seemed to look in multiple directions at once, was clicking his mandibles rapidly as he explained to a group of junior officers how his civilization's drone swarm technology could overwhelm any human defense system through sheer numbers and coordination. His species, the Hive Collective, operated on a hive mind principle where millions of smaller units could be controlled by a single brilliant tactician like himself. Ward General Grell stood near the refreshment station, his body looking like it had been carved from living granite, with skin that resembled cracked stone and eyes that glowed with a dull red light from deep within his massive head. He was laughing loudly at something one of his subordinates had said, the deep rumbling sound echoing through the hall like rocks grinding together in an earthquake. His people, the Stone Confederation, were known for building ships with virtually impenetrable defenses. Their vessels could take hits from weapons that would vaporize other ships and barely show a scratch. Grell had been bragging all morning about how his flagship, the Star's Shield, had once survived a direct hit from a planet-killer weapon and emerged completely undamaged, ready to continue fighting. And finally there was Thought Admiral Pax, who stood alone in a quiet corner of the hall, seemingly lost in meditation. Her species, the Luminara, were known for their powerful psychic abilities, and she looked Almost fragile compared to the other commanders with delicate bone structure, pale silver skin and large eyes that glowed with soft blue light, but everyone in the room knew that underestimating Pax would be a fatal mistake. Her ship, the Mind Weaver, didn't rely on conventional weapons. Instead, it could project waves of pure terror into enemy crews, causing entire fleets to surrender without firing a single shot. She had won more battles through psychological warfare than most commanders won through actual combat. These 5 commanders represented the absolute pinnacle of military power in the known galaxy. Between them they controlled fleets that could destroy entire star systems if they chose to do so. They had centuries or even millennia of experience in warfare. They commanded technologies that seemed like magic to less advanced species, and they all shared one common opinion about the newest members of the galactic community. Humans were not ready to play in this league. Humans were newcomers, primitives. Children who had barely learned to walk among the stars, and now they had the audacity to show up at the most prestigious military gathering in galactic history expecting to be taken seriously. It was almost insulting. The very fact that the council had extended an invitation felt like a joke to these seasoned warriors who had fought in wars that lasted longer than human civilization had existed. The general consensus among the 5 commanders was that this summit would be embarrassing for Earth and entertaining for everyone else. They would watch politely as the humans showed off whatever crude weapons they had managed to cobble together. Then they would return to their respective empires with amusing stories about the primitive species that thought it could compete with the galaxy's true powers. None of them suspected that within 24 hours their entire understanding of military hierarchy would be shattered. The main doors to the reception hall slid open with a soft pneumatic hiss and the gentle chime of the station's AI system announcing a new arrival. Immediately every conversation in the room stopped mid-sentence, and hundreds of eyes from dozens of different species turned toward the entrance, curious to see what humanity had sent to represent their species. What walked through those doors was not what anyone expected. Instead of a delegation, there was just one person, a single human male who entered. Alone, without any entourage or advisors or honor guard, he wore a simple dark blue military uniform that was almost plain by galactic standards, with minimal decorations, just a few subtle insignia patches and rank markers that meant nothing to the aliens watching him. His face showed neither the excitement of someone attending their first major galactic event nor the nervousness that would be expected from someone so completely outmatched. He simply looked calm, focused and quietly confident as he surveyed the room with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Commander Jack Reynolds announced the station's AI system in its neutral synthetic voice, representative of Earth and the Solar System Defense Force. Jack walked into the center of the hall at a measured pace, not hurrying but not hesitating either. As hundreds of alien beings watched his every move, he stopped in the middle of the room, gave a polite nod to everyone present and spoke in clear English, which the universal translators worn by every attendee instantly converted to their native languages. "Thank you for the invitation," he said simply. "Earth is honored to join this historic summit, and we look forward to learning from the experienced members of the galactic community." Admiral Vex was the first to approach, moving with the fluid grace that his species was known for. Despite his height, he seemed to glide across the floor rather than walk. He loomed over Jack by at least 2 feet, his 3 eyes blinking in that distinctive pattern as he looked down at the human. "Commander Reynolds, I am Supreme Admiral Vex of the Azui Empire. I must confess we were quite surprised when we heard that humans would be attending this year. The summit has very high standards and your species has only recently achieved interstellar travel." Jack met Vex's gaze without flinching or looking away, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Good surprises keep life interesting, Admiral Vex," he replied, his tone friendly but not submissive. "I find that expectations are often more interesting when they're challenged." Before Vex could formulate a response to that cryptic statement, Battlemaster Tora approached her, heavy footsteps making the floor vibrate slightly with each step. Despite the station's advanced stabilization systems, she stopped right next to Jack, her massive frame making him look almost child-sized by comparison. Her 4 arms remained crossed as she looked down at him with an expression that might have been amusement or might have been contempt. It was hard to tell with Krell facial features. "Battlemaster Tora of the Krell Dominion," she introduced herself, her voice deep and resonant. "Your species has achieved much in a very short time, human. I will grant you that much, but this summit showcases the absolute pinnacle of military achievement across thousands of worlds. I hope you won't feel too overwhelmed by what you see here today." Jack's expression remained completely neutral, showing neither offense at her condescending tone nor any sign of intimidation. "I appreciate your concern, Battlemaster," he said calmly, "but I think you'll find that humans are quite good at adapting to new situations. It's one of our better qualities. Actually, we've had a lot of practice at being underestimated and we've learned to use it to our advantage." Tora's scales rippled slightly in what might have been surprise at his response, but she said nothing more. One by one the other three commanders approached to introduce themselves, each greeting containing its own subtle message about the hierarchy and where they believed humans belonged in it. Chief Strategist Mech clicked his mandibles in a pattern that his translator converted into formal greetings while his compound eyes examined Jack from multiple angles simultaneously, as if trying to understand how this small primitive creature had the confidence to stand among giants. War General Grell laughed loudly when he shook Jack's hand, his grip strong enough that it would have crushed the bones of a weaker being, but Jack didn't wince or pull away. He simply returned the handshake with equal firmness and met Grell's glowing eyes with his own steady gaze. Thought Admiral Pax was the last to approach, and unlike the others she didn't try to physically intimidate Jack. Instead she reached out with her psychic senses, trying to read his emotional state, expecting to find fear, nervousness, or perhaps naive excitement. What she found instead was something that made her pause, calm certainty, and beneath that something else, something she couldn't quite identify. It was like touching a wall where she expected to find an open door. The station's AI chimed again, drawing everyone's attention. All representatives have now arrived. Please proceed to the main presentation chamber for the opening ceremony. The formal demonstrations will begin in 30 minutes. Jack nodded politely to the 5 commanders and began walking toward the presentation chamber. The other attendees followed, creating a flowing river of diverse alien beings heading toward the massive doors at the far end of the reception hall. As they walked, Jack could feel the eyes on him, could hear the whispered conversations in a dozen different languages, all speculating about what Earth could possibly show that would be worth anyone's time. He had expected this reaction, had in fact been counting on it. Sometimes the best strategy was to let your opponents underestimate you right up until the moment you proved them completely wrong. The grand presentation hall was enormous, easily large enough to hold 1,000 beings comfortably, and it had been specifically designed to showcase military technology in the most impressive way possible. The center of the room was dominated by a massive holographic projection system that could create 3-dimensional images so realistic they were almost indistinguishable from physical objects. The system was currently displaying a slowly rotating image of Space Station Unity itself, showing all the ships that had gathered around it for the summit, like a metal forest of different designs and sizes. The seating was arranged in a circular amphitheater style, with the 5 major powers given prominent positions on a raised platform where they could see everything clearly and be seen by everyone else. Their seats were large ornate affairs that looked more like thrones than chairs, each one customized for the physiology of its occupant. Jack noticed that his assigned seat was off to the side, not on the main platform but rather in a secondary area usually reserved for observers and minor delegates. It was another subtle message about where Earth ranked in the galactic hierarchy. He took his seat without complaint, settling in to watch what the others had to offer. The Galactic Council's mediator floated into the center of the room, drawing everyone's attention. This being was unlike any species Jack had ever seen in the intelligence briefings. It appeared to be made of liquid silver that held a vaguely humanoid shape but with no distinct features, no visible face, no obvious sensory organs, just a smooth flowing surface that reflected the lights of the chamber. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, resonating through the air without any apparent source. Welcome to the 1000 Centennial Military Showcase, the mediator announced, its voice carrying easily to every corner of the massive hall. For 10,000 years this gathering has maintained peace through transparency and the careful balance of power. We gather, not to threaten but to inform, not to boast but to demonstrate the capabilities that keep our territories safe. Today we welcome our newest spacefaring neighbors, the humans of Earth. There was a polite smattering of applause, though Jack noticed that several delegations barely participated, their hands or appendages or whatever they used for clapping moving slowly and without enthusiasm. The mediator continued, we will begin with presentations from our 5 established powers who have been the guardians of galactic stability for millennia. Following their demonstrations we will hear from our newest member, Admiral Vex. You may begin the presentation. Admiral Vex stood from his throne-like chair with fluid grace and activated a control interface on his wrist. Immediately the massive holographic display shifted, its image dissolving from the view of the station to show something new. A sleek, predatory-looking vessel appeared floating in the center of the room. Its hull was dark, almost black, and it seemed to fade in and out of visibility even in the hologram, as if reality itself couldn't quite decide whether the ship was there or not. The design was elegant, all smooth curves and angular edges that suggested speed and stealth. I present to you the Shadow Strike, Vex announced, his voice filled with unmistakable pride, the pinnacle of Azui engineering and the flagship of our stealth fleet. This vessel represents 2 centuries of research and development in adaptive camouflage technology and sensor manipulation. He gestured at the hologram, which began to demonstrate the ship's capabilities. Watch as the Shadow Strike activates its cloaking systems. The Holographic ship shimmered once and then simply vanished, completely gone. As if it had never existed. There were appreciative murmurs throughout the audience, even from those who had seen similar demonstrations before. The technology was impressive. There was no denying that our camouflage system works by bending light and all forms of electromagnetic radiation around the hull, Vex explained, while the hologram showed technical diagrams and sensor readings that proved the ship was still there but completely undetectable to any known scanning technology. We can adjust the refractive index in real time to match any background, whether we're hiding against the darkness of space or the corona of a star. We have tested this system against every type of sensor in the known galaxy, and none of them can detect the shadow strike when it's fully cloaked. The implications are significant. Vex continued, glancing briefly at Jack as he spoke. This ship can enter an enemy star system, deploy weapons, satellites, or gather intelligence and leave without ever being detected. It can position itself next to an enemy flagship and fire at point-blank range before they even know we're there. The ultimate predator needs no armor when it cannot be seen. Jack watched with genuine interest, occasionally making small notes on a simple electronic pad he had brought with him. His expression remained attentive and thoughtful, but not awed, not intimidated, just carefully observing and processing the information being presented. Vex spent another 10 minutes detailing the Shadow Strike specifications, its weapons systems, its propulsion capabilities, its crew complement and operational range. Every detail was designed to make it clear that the Azui Empire possessed technology that could strike anywhere, at any time, without warning. It was intimidating by design, meant to make potential enemies think twice before considering any aggressive action. When Vex finally finished and returned to his seat, there was enthusiastic applause from most of the audience. Battlemaster Tora was next, and she wasted no time in activating her own holographic presentation. What appeared in the center of the hall made even Vex's impressive stealth ship look small by comparison. It was a massive dreadnought, a floating city of weapons and armor that dwarfed everything around it. The hull was thick and brutal looking, covered in overlapping armor plates that resembled her own red scales and bristling with more weapon ports than Jack could quickly count. "I present the world Breaker," Tora announced, her voice booming through the hall with barely contained pride. "The largest battleship ever constructed by any civilization. The Krell Dominion does not hide from its enemies. We meet them head-on with overwhelming force." She gestured, and the hologram zoomed in to show a particular section of the ship, a massive cannon that ran almost the entire length of the vessel. "This is the planetary siege cannon," she explained. "Its barrel is 3 kilometers long and it fires projectiles weighing 5,000 tons at a significant fraction of light speed. The kinetic energy alone is sufficient to crack a planet's tectonic plates." The hologram shifted to show a demonstration that had apparently been recorded during weapons testing. The World Breaker fired its main gun at an uninhabited moon, and the result was catastrophic. The impact sent shockwaves rippling across the lunar surface, visible even from orbit. Large sections of the moon broke apart, sending massive chunks of rock spinning off into space. The audience gasped, and there was scattered applause at the sheer destructive power on display. No fleet has ever stood against the World Breaker and survived. Tora continued, "Our shields can withstand sustained bombardment from multiple capital ships. Our armor is thick enough to shrug off weapons that would vaporize lesser vessels, and our firepower can reduce entire enemy fleets to expanding clouds of debris in minutes." She looked directly at Jack as she said this, as if making sure the human understood exactly what kind of forces he was dealing with. "The Krell way is simple and effective. We build ships that cannot be stopped, and we use them to protect our territory from anyone foolish enough to challenge us." Chief Strategist Mech went next, and his presentation took a completely different approach. Instead of one massive ship or one ultra-advanced stealth vessel, his hologram showed thousands of small craft, each no larger than a fighter jet but moving together in perfect synchronization like a school of fish or a flock of birds. "The swarm cloud," he announced, his mandibles clicking rapidly as he spoke with obvious enthusiasm, "representing the pinnacle of distributed warfare and networked intelligence. Each individual drone is relatively simple and inexpensive to produce, but together they form a collective intelligence that can outmaneuver and overwhelm any conventional fleet." The hologram demonstrated as the drone swarm flowed around obstacles, changed formation instantly in response to threats, and coordinated attacks from multiple angles simultaneously. "Our hive mind technology allows a single strategist to control millions of these drones as if they were extensions of our own body," Mech explained. "They can adapt to any tactical situation in real time, learning from enemy movements and countering strategies faster than any biological crew could possibly respond individually. They are weak together, they are unstoppable." He showed recorded footage of war games where the swarm cloud had gone up against conventional battle groups and overwhelmed them through sheer numbers and perfect coordination. War General Grell's presentation focused on pure defense. His flagship the Star Shield demonstrated shield technology that could apparently withstand almost anything. The hologram showed simulations where the ship sat motionless while wave after wave of weapons fire from multiple sources struck its shields and dissipated harmlessly. Our energy barriers operate on principles that your species haven't even theorized yet, Grell rumbled, his rocky face showing something that might have been a smile. We layer multiple shield frequencies creating interference patterns that can redirect or absorb any form of energy weapon. The Stone Confederation has spent 3,000 years perfecting defensive technology, and the result is a vessel that simply cannot be destroyed through conventional means. The demonstration showed the Star Shield taking hits from weapons that would have vaporized Vex's stealth ship or punched through Tora's armor, and the shields held firm, barely even flickering under the assault. Grell let the implications hang in the air. Any attacker would exhaust their weapons long before they breached our defenses. Meanwhile, our own weapons remain free to fire at leisure. It's not glamorous perhaps, but it's devastatingly effective. Finally, thought Admiral Pax stepped forward for her presentation, and the mood in the room shifted subtly, becoming quieter, more tense. Her hologram showed a ship that looked almost delicate compared to the others, with smooth organic curves and a pale luminescent hull that seemed to glow with its own internal light. The Mind Weaver, she said softly, her voice carrying easily despite its gentle volume, represents an entirely different approach to warfare. Not all battles need to be won with weapons. Sometimes the greatest victory comes from making your enemy surrender before the fighting even begins. The hologram showed something unusual. Instead of weapons fire or explosions, it displayed brain wave patterns and psychological profiles. Pax explained how her ship could project targeted psychic attacks that exploited the deepest fears and insecurities of enemy crews. We have studied the psychology of every major species in the galaxy, she continued. We know what terrifies the Azui, what fills the Krell with doubt, what makes the Stone Confederation question their choices. The Mind Weaver can project these fears directly into the minds of enemy crews, causing panic, confusion, and ultimately complete psychological collapse without firing a single physical weapon. She showed recorded footage from actual engagements where enemy fleets had simply stopped fighting and surrendered after being subjected to the Mind Weaver's psychic assault. It was deeply unsettling to watch professional military crews reduced to terrified wrecks who would rather face execution than continue fighting against an enemy that could invade their very thoughts. Our most recent engagement lasted exactly 14 minutes, Pax said, before the enemy flagship captain ordered his entire fleet to power down weapons and request terms of surrender. They had not suffered a single casualty, not one damaged ship, but they were completely defeated nonetheless. After each presentation, the eyes in the room kept turning toward Jack, watching for signs of intimidation or awe, or the dawning realization that Earth was completely out of its depth here. But Jack remained calm, taking his notes, occasionally nodding in genuine appreciation when a particularly impressive technical feat was demonstrated, but showing no signs of being overwhelmed or frightened. When all 5 demonstrations were complete, the mediator turned toward Jack. Commander Reynolds, the Council now welcomes Earth's presentation. Vex couldn't resist a small smirk. Yes, humans, show us what your young species has managed to cobble together in your few short decades of space travel. The room grew very quiet as Jack stood and walked calmly to the center platform. Instead of immediately activating the holographic system like the others had, he simply stood there for a moment, looking around at all the assembled representatives, his gaze moving from one species to another. Thank you all for those truly impressive demonstrations, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. Each of you has shown remarkable achievements in your respective specialties, and Earth has much to learn from your experience. He paused, letting that sink in before continuing. However, Earth's contribution to this showcase is still in transit to this location. It will arrive tomorrow morning at precisely 0800 station time. There were immediate murmurs of surprise, and some mocking laughter rippled through sections of the audience. Mech's mandibles clicked rapidly in what was clearly the insectoid equivalent of laughter. Your ship is late, he asked, sounding amused. Did your primitive engines break down on the journey here? Not late, Jack replied calmly, right on schedule. Actually, some things are worth waiting for, and we prefer to do demonstrations properly rather than rushing them. Tora leaned forward in her throne, her 4 arms unfolding to rest on the armrests. Why not simply show us holographic projections and technical specifications like everyone else has done, she asked. There's no need to have the actual vessel present for a presentation. Jack smiled slightly, and for the first time since arriving at the station, There was something in that smile that made several of the commanders shift uncomfortably in their seats. "We prefer real demonstrations over simulations," he said. "Earth has found that showing is always more effective than telling, and what we're going to show you tomorrow is best experienced in person rather than as a hologram. I hope you'll all understand when you see it." Grell rumbled in his deep grinding voice. "Are you perhaps stalling because there is nothing to show human? Is this some kind of primitive trick to buy time while you figure out what to do?" Jack turned to face the massive stone-skinned general directly. "I assure you, General, there is no trick. Earth doesn't bluff about military matters. We take such things far too seriously to play games. When we say we have something to show you, we mean it exactly, and you'll see it tomorrow morning as promised." As the session formally adjourned and the gathered representatives began filing out of the presentation hall, the 5 alien commanders gathered in a small cluster watching Jack leave through the side exit. "Did you see his face?" Beck asked, his 3 eyes blinking rapidly. "No reaction whatsoever to our demonstrations. Either humans are too primitive to understand what they just saw, or he knows something we don't." "I'm leaning toward the former," Tora said dismissively. "Probably brought along some crude missile launcher, or maybe a slightly better engine design than what they've been using, and thinks it's impressive compared to our technology. It will be embarrassing for them. I almost feel bad about it." Almost. Grell laughed, his rocky features creasing in what passed for a smile among his species. "Let them have their moment in the sun, even if it's a humiliating one. Every young species needs to learn their place in the galactic order. Might as well let them learn it here where it won't actually cost them." War Pax had been silent during this exchange, her glowing eyes distant as if lost in thought. Finally she spoke quietly while the others were still chuckling about the situation. "Or they have something they genuinely believe will impress us." The other 4 commanders turned to look at her. "Or what?" Beck demanded. "Or what scenario are you imagining where primitive humans show us something we haven't seen?" Pax met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "I reached out to the human during his introduction," she said, "just a light touch to gauge his emotional state. I expected nervousness, perhaps naive excitement, maybe even fear of being out of his depth." The other commanders listened with interest. Pax's psychic abilities were well known and respected. "What did you sense?" Tora asked, "and what did you find instead?" Pax was quiet for a moment before answering. "Certainty," she said, "confidence, not the false bravado of someone trying to hide their weakness, but genuine calm assurance, as if he knows something we don't, and underneath that there was something else, something I couldn't quite identify. It was like trying to read through a barrier. There was more there, but he wasn't letting me see it." The 5 commanders looked at each other, uncertainty beginning to creep into their expressions for the first time. "You think they actually have something real?" Mech asked, his mandibles clicking more slowly now. "Something that could be legitimately impressive?" Pax shrugged, a graceful gesture despite her alien physiology. "I think we should watch tomorrow's demonstration with open mind," she said. "Earth is a young species, yes, but youth doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes it means innovation unrestrained by tradition. We've all grown comfortable with our established technologies, maybe too comfortable." Vex waved a dismissive hand. "They've had faster than light travel for 30 years, he pointed out. 30 years compared to our thousands. We have nothing to worry about. I'm sure whatever they show tomorrow will be interesting in its own primitive way, but let's not get carried away with speculation. We'll see soon enough." Tora agreed with a firm nod. "Though I still expect to be underwhelmed. Humans are newcomers. They simply haven't had time to develop anything that could compare to what we showed today. None of them noticed the slight smile on Jack's face as he walked down the corridor heading back to his assigned quarters on the station, and none of them saw the quiet message he sent from his wrist-mounted communications device using encrypted channels that the station's systems couldn't intercept. "Stage is set," he typed. "Bring her in." The evening reception aboard Space Station Unity was held in the magnificent observation dome, a massive transparent structure that provided an unobstructed 360-degree view of the surrounding space. Stars wheeled slowly overhead as the station rotated, and the gathered ships of the various civilizations hung in the darkness like illuminated sculptures, each position to be clearly visible, a floating testament to their builders' pride. The interior of the dome had been decorated with floating lights that drifted through the air like captive stars, and servers, both biological and robotic, moved through the crowd offering drinks and refreshments from 100 different worlds. Diplomatic staff and military officers from every corner of the galaxy mingled, creating a living tapestry of colors, shapes and sizes that represented the incredible diversity of spacefaring life. Jack Reynolds stood alone near the curved viewport watching the assembled fleet with apparent interest. His dark blue uniform marked him as different from the elaborate ceremonial dress that most other attendees wore. His simplicity somehow made him more noticeable rather than less Admiring superior technology, human, a voice said from behind him. Jack turned to find Admiral Vex approaching with two crystal containers filled with liquid, one deep blue and the other an amber color that seemed to glow slightly with its own light. The tall alien offered one of the containers to Jack, who accepted it with a polite nod. "I appreciate good engineering when I see it," Jack replied, taking a careful sip of the liquid. It tasted like cinnamon mixed with something he couldn't identify, but pleasant enough. "Your reaction to our presentations today was interesting," Vex said, his three eyes studying Jack with obvious curiosity. "Most newcomer species are overwhelmed by their first summit. The technologies we demonstrated represent centuries or millennia of advancement, yet you seemed almost unmoved." Jack smiled slightly over the rim of his drink. "Earth has a saying, never show your cards too early in the game." Cards game. Vex translator seemed to struggle with the idiom for a moment, creating a brief pause before rendering something approximating the meaning. "It's a gambling reference," Jack explained. "It means don't reveal your full capabilities until the right moment. Let others make assumptions about what you can or cannot do, then surprise them when it matters most." Before Vex could formulate a response to that somewhat ominous statement, a booming voice called out across the observation dome, "There he is, the mysterious human who keeps us all in suspense." Battlemaster Tora pushed through the crowd with the casual ease of someone who knew nobody would dare block her path. The other three commanders followed in her wake, Mech's metallic exoskeleton clicking softly as he walked, Grell's heavy footsteps making the floor vibrate even through the dampening systems, and Pax gliding along almost silently, her luminous eyes fixed on Jack with that same probing intensity from before. They formed a loose semicircle around him, their combined presence drawing attention from others in the dome, who began edging closer to listen. "Why so secretive about your ship?" Commander Tora asked, looming over Jack with her considerable height and mass. "Surely you could at least show us technical specifications or perhaps some holographic imagery. There's no need to make us wait until tomorrow, unless of course there's some problem you're not telling us about." Jack took another sip of his drink, seeming completely unconcerned by being effectively surrounded by the five most powerful military commanders in known space. "I prefer to let actions speak louder than words," he said calmly. "Another Earth saying, another human idiom," Mech interjected, his mandibles clicking in rapid patterns that suggested amusement or perhaps skepticism. "Perhaps there is nothing actually to show. Perhaps this is all just what's your word?" "Ah yes," bluffing. Jack's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened slightly. "That would be extremely unwise," he replied, his voice still calm but carrying an edge now. "Earth doesn't bluff about military matters. We learned a long time ago that false bravado in warfare gets people killed. We take such things very seriously." Grell rumbled with laughter, the sound like grinding stone, his glowing eyes fixed on Jack with an expression that might have been respect or might have been pity. "Tell us, human, what could your species possibly create in a mere 30 years of spaceflight that would even remotely compare to what you witnessed today? We've been crossing the stars for thousands of years. We've fought wars that lasted longer than your civilization has existed. Our technologies have been refined through countless conflicts, and you want us to believe that somehow humanity built something impressive enough to showcase here?" Jack turned to face the five commanders more directly, setting his drink down on a nearby floating server platform. "You're absolutely right that we're newcomers to space," he admitted without any trace of shame in his voice, "but you're making a critical error in assuming that being new to space travel means we're inexperienced in all aspects of warfare." Pax, who had been silent until now, stepped slightly forward, her glowing eyes brightening. "You speak with unusual confidence for someone whose people have never attended this summit before," she observed, her voice soft but penetrating. "There's something you're not telling us, something you believe will change our perception." "Experience isn't always measured in years," Jack replied. "Sometimes it's measured in intensity. Earth may be young in terms of space exploration, but we have a very old and very thorough education in warfare." "What does that mean?" Tora demanded, her forearms crossing over her chest in a gesture that looked almost defensive. Jack looked at each of the five commanders in turn, as if weighing how much to reveal. "How many wars has your species fought in the last 500 years?" Battlemaster Tora, the question seemed to surprise her. She paused for a moment, calculating 3 major conflicts. She finally answered, "All victories for the Krell Dominion. We expanded our territory by conquering 2 neighboring systems and successfully defended against an incursion from the Zephyr Collective." Jack nodded thoughtfully, then turned to address each alien in turn, asking the same question. "Admiral Vex, how many wars for the Azui?" "2 wars of expansion," Vex answered, his skin shifting to a slightly darker shade. "The Shadow Strike played a decisive role in both, by eliminating enemy leadership before they could effectively mobilize their forces." Chief Strategist Mech. The Hive Collective has fought 4 defensive wars. Mech replied, his compound eyes reflecting the lights of the observation dome, all against species who underestimated our coordination and paid the price when our swarms overwhelmed their conventional forces. War General Grell. One great war approximately 3 centuries ago. Grell rumbled with pride, a conflict that lasted 50 years and ended when the Star's shield proved completely invulnerable to every weapon our enemies possessed. They sued for peace rather than continue wasting resources on futile attacks and thought. Admiral Pax. Jack asked, turning to the psychic commander. The Lumira avoid physical conflict whenever possible, Pax said quietly, her voice carrying a hint of what might have been sadness. Our abilities make traditional warfare distasteful to us. We prefer diplomatic solutions. However, we have conducted one major defensive action in recent history when a particularly aggressive species attempted invasion. We broke their will to fight without killing a single soldier. They left our space and never returned. Jack nodded slowly as if confirming something he had already suspected. The combined total, he said, doing the mental arithmetic, is roughly 10 major conflicts across 5 species over a span of 500 years. That averages to 1 war every 50 years spread across all of you. Impressive military history certainly, but relatively peaceful by our standards. He paused, letting that statement hang in the air for a moment. The murmur of other conversations in the observation dome had faded as more and more attendees noticed the intense discussion happening between the commanders and the human representative. Earth's recorded history includes over 15,000 wars, Jack said quietly. The number hit the 5 commanders like a physical blow. That's impossible, Vex said immediately. No species could survive that much internal conflict. Your civilization would have destroyed itself long ago. We almost did, Jack admitted, several times actually. Before we achieved spaceflight we fought over 300 major conflicts just in the last 500 years. Our deadliest war killed nearly 100 million people. In 6 years we developed weapons capable of destroying entire cities in seconds, and we used them twice just to prove we would do it again if necessary. The alien commander stared at him in what appeared to be genuine shock. The conversations around them had gone completely silent now as everyone within earshot listened to this unexpected revelation. That's barbaric, Vex finally said, his 3 eyes wide. That level of violence that's insanity. How did your species survive? That's survival, Jack corrected, his tone hardening slightly. Every one of those wars taught us something about how to fight better, how to build more effective weapons, how to protect ourselves more efficiently, how to win at any cost. You've all enjoyed relative peace for centuries, punctuated by occasional conflicts, sure, but long periods of stability in between. We never had that luxury. Humanity spent thousands of years in almost constant warfare. Somewhere on our planet someone was always fighting, someone else was always trying to survive, was always improving their military technology out of desperate necessity. While your civilizations were peacefully exploring the stars and advancing your sciences, we were testing weapons against each other that could level cities, designing armor that could withstand those weapons, then designing better weapons to penetrate that armor in an endless cycle of escalation driven by the simple fact that if we stopped innovating, if we fell behind even for a moment, the other side would destroy us. You're actually proud of this violent history? Pax asked, her glowing eyes dimming slightly in what might have been horror or disgust. Not proud, Jack said firmly, but we don't deny what it taught us. We don't pretend it didn't happen or that we've somehow evolved beyond our nature. We learned warfare in the hardest school imaginable against opponents who knew all our weaknesses because they were the same species. An uncomfortable silence fell over the gathered crowd. Other species had violent histories, of course, but nothing on the scale that the human was describing. 15,000 wars was an almost incomprehensible number. It suggested a species that was fundamentally different from the established galactic norm, a species shaped by conflict the way water shapes stone through constant pressure over immense time. Tora finally broke the tension with a forced laugh that sounded slightly less confident than before. Big talk from a small species tomorrow. We'll see if there's any substance behind these claims or if you're just trying to intimidate us with stories. Indeed we will, Jack replied, his expression neutral but his eyes sharp as steel. I think you'll find that humanity is very good at backing up our claims with demonstration. The reception continued for another 2 hours, but the atmosphere had changed. The 5 commanders kept their distance from Jack for the remainder of the evening gathering. Instead, at the far end of the observation dome, speaking in low urgent voices that their security systems kept private from casual eavesdropping. Do you believe him? Mech asked, his mandibles clicking nervously. 15,000 wars, it seems statistically impossible. Unless they're incredibly short-lived as a species. Vex suggested maybe their lifespans are measured in decades rather than centuries, and what we consider one generation they consider 10. That would make the number more feasible. I checked their biological data. Pax said quietly. They live roughly 80 to 100 years on average, similar to many species, longer than some, shorter than others. Nothing unusual there. So if the number is accurate, Grell rumbled, then we're dealing with a species that has spent virtually its entire existence fighting itself. They would have evolved strategies we've never encountered, developed technologies driven purely by military necessity rather than scientific curiosity. Talk is still easy, Tora insisted, though her voice lacked its earlier certainty. Tomorrow we see this ship of theirs. I still expect to be underwhelmed. Nothing they could have built in 30 years of spaceflight could compare to what we showed today. But what if they didn't build it in 30 years? Pax said softly. What if they've been building warships for centuries in secret on their own planet before they ever left their star system? What if everything they learned in those 15,000 wars went into designing the most efficient killing machine they could imagine? The other four commanders fell silent at that thought. It was an uncomfortable scenario to consider, that somewhere in a distant corner of the galaxy a species had been refining the art of warfare for millennia without any external oversight or galactic regulation, developing technologies and strategies in complete isolation, driven by necessity and survival. We'll know tomorrow, Vex finally said, his skin shifting through several shades of blue and gray in quick succession. Until then there's no point in speculation. Across the observation dome, Jack Reynolds stood alone once more, gazing out at the assembled fleet of alien warships, each one representing centuries or millennia of development, each one designed to project power and inspire respect. His reflection in the curved viewport showed that slight smile again, the one that didn't quite reach his eyes but suggested he knew something that nobody else in the room had figured out yet. He raised his wrist to check a private message that had just arrived on his encrypted channel. Captain Lin reporting, all systems green. He read, we're maintaining position just outside sensor range as ordered. Crew is eager to show these folks what Earth engineering can really do. Jack typed back a brief response, hold position until morning, then come in slow. I want them to have time to really see her before we get to the demonstrations. Morning came to Space Station Unity as its rotation gradually brought the main habitation ring into the light of the nearby star system. The station's artificial day-night cycle was designed to accommodate the biological rhythms of most species, so the transition was gentle rather than sudden, giving residents time to wake naturally rather than being shocked into consciousness. Jack stood in his assigned quarters, straightening his uniform before a mirror and running through mental checklists of the day's planned demonstrations. His quarters were modest compared to those assigned to the 5 commanders, but he hadn't complained. Earth's representative didn't need luxury, just functionality. His communication device chimed softly with an incoming call. Reynolds here, Commander, this is Captain Lin. We've completed our approach and are now holding at the designated coordinates just outside the station's primary sensor range. We're ready to proceed on your command. Perfect timing, Jack replied. Give me 30 minutes to get to the presentation chamber, then bring her in slowly. I want a nice dramatic entrance that they'll remember. Understood, sir, Captain Lin replied with barely suppressed excitement in her voice. The crew has been looking forward to this moment for weeks. We won't disappoint. Jack smiled slightly. I have complete confidence in you and your crew, Captain. This is going to be educational for everyone involved. Reynolds out. When Jack arrived at the presentation chamber, he found all 5 alien commanders already present along with most of the summit attendees. The room buzzed with speculation about what Earth would demonstrate. Some voices were skeptical, others curious, a few openly mocking. The general consensus seemed to be that the human ship would be interesting perhaps, but nothing that would fundamentally challenge the established order. The 5 commanders sat in their designated positions on the raised platform, looking down at the center stage where Jack would give his presentation. Tora's 4 arms were crossed in her characteristic pose of patient skepticism. Vex's 3 eyes tracked Jack's movement across the room with analytical precision. Mech's mandibles clicked in a slow rhythm that suggested anticipation. Grell sat motionless as always, his stone-like features unreadable, and Pax watched with those glowing eyes that seemed to see more than just the physical realm. Commander Reynolds, the mediator's voice echoed through the chamber, drawing everyone's attention. The Galactic Council is eager to witness Earth's contribution to this historic summit. Please proceed when ready. Jack walked calmly to the center platform and activated his wrist interface. The massive holographic display system in the middle of the room came to life, showing a view of space near the station. At first it displayed nothing unusual, just the normal starfield that surrounded the station, with a few distant ships visible as small points of light. "Thank you, Mediator," Jack said, his voice carrying clearly through the now silent chamber. "Earth is honored to present our contribution today." He tapped his wrist device and the holographic display shifted to show a different region of space still appearing empty. "Where is it?" someone called out from the audience to scattered laughter. "Is your ship invisible like the shadow strike?" another voice asked with obvious mockery. Jack tapped his device again, opening a communication channel. "Captain Lin, you may bring her in now." The holographic display was slave to the station's external sensors, which automatically tracked and displayed any significant objects entering the area. At first nothing seemed to change. The view remained static, showing only empty space. Then the sensors detected something. The display automatically adjusted, zooming in on a new contact that was approaching from the outer system. At first it appeared as just a small dot, but as the station's powerful sensors focused on it and began calculating distance and size, the dot grew larger. The automatic readout in the corner of the hologram showed range decreasing rapidly as the object approached at sublight speeds. "What is that?" Vex asked, leaning forward in his seat, his three eyes fixed on the display. "The sensors are having trouble resolving its size." "That can't be right," Tora muttered, staring at the size calculations that kept changing as the station's systems tried to get an accurate measurement. "It's saying that object is the size of a small moon. The sensors must be malfunctioning." Jack stood calmly in the center of the room, watching the reactions with quiet satisfaction. "The sensors are functioning perfectly," he said as the object continued to grow larger on the display, its true form beginning to become visible. It was a ship, but unlike anything the assembled aliens had ever encountered before, where their vessels followed elegant curved designs inspired by natural forms or geometric patterns meant to minimize sensor signatures. This ship was all brutal functionality, hard angles and flat planes that looked like they'd been designed by someone who cared nothing for aesthetics and everything for effectiveness. The hull was dark, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, and covered in what appeared to be armor plating thick enough to be visible even from a distance. As it drew nearer, the holographic display struggled to fit the entire vessel in frame. Even at maximum zoom out, the ship just kept getting larger and larger, dominating the view the way a mountain dominates a landscape. The station's automated systems began running comparisons, pulling up specifications from known vessels for scale. When the world breaker appeared next to the human ship in the hologram for size comparison, there was a collective gasp from the audience. Tora's pride and joy. The largest battleship ever constructed looked like a child's toy next to the dark angular mass of the human vessel. "I present to you," Jack announced into the stunned silence, "the HSS Leviathan, humanity's answer to the question of how to ensure our survival in an unknown galaxy. This is a mid-sized vessel in Earth's deep space defense fleet." The room erupted in shocked exclamations. Representatives from dozens of species stood from their seats trying to get a better view of the holographic display. Some activated their own scanning devices attempting to verify what they were seeing. The 5 alien commanders sat frozen in their elevated positions, staring at the impossible ship that made their carefully cultivated military supremacy suddenly look questionable. "Mid-sized?" Vex asked weakly, his three eyes blinking rapidly in sequence. His skin had gone pale blue, almost white. "Yes, Admiral," Jack replied calmly. "We classify the Leviathan as a medium cruiser. We have frigates and destroyers that are smaller, and we have dreadnoughts and carriers that are considerably larger." The ship continued its approach, moving with surprising grace for something so massive, its engines barely visible, just slight distortions in space that suggested tremendous power being carefully controlled. The Leviathan was now close enough that surface details were becoming visible. Weapon ports, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, arranged in geometric patterns across the hull. Sensor arrays that looked more like small buildings. Launching bays large enough to swallow corvettes. Armor plating that appeared to be measured in meters rather than centimeters of thickness. "This is impossible," Mech said, his mandibles frozen mid-click. "The resources required to build something that size, the engineering challenges, the power requirements. It would take decades just to design such a vessel, let alone construct it." 3 years, Jack said simply. "The Leviathan was constructed in shipyards within Jupiter's orbit using materials harvested from our asteroid belt. It took exactly 3 years from laying the keel to commission. We work very quickly when necessary." 3 years, Tora repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. All 4 of her arms had unclenched, hanging limply at her sides in shock. "My world breaker took 20 years to build, and it's a fraction of that size. Our civilization has extensive experience with large-scale industrial projects," Jack explained. "We've been building city-sized structures on our home world for centuries. Scaling up to ship construction was mainly a matter of working in zero gravity rather than against gravity. If anything, it's easier." Before anyone could respond to that alarming statement, alarms began sounding throughout the station, a loud urgent wailing that made everyone jump. The Mediator's form rippled in what might have been surprise or concern. "Unauthorized weapon activation detected," it announced. "Multiple vessels are powering up defensive systems. On secondary displays around the chamber, the various alien ships could be seen moving into defensive formations, their shields activating one by one, creating shimmering barriers of energy around their hulls. Weapon systems that had been dormant were now coming online, targeting sensors sweeping the area searching for threats. Stand down, Grell ordered into his communication device. This is not an attack situation. Repeat, this is not an attack. My ships are responding automatically, Vex said urgently. Checking readouts on his wrist device, our automated defense protocols have activated. They've identified the human vessel as a potential planet killer class threat and initiated threat response procedures. The same is happening across my fleet, Tora added, her voice tight with controlled panic. Our tactical AI systems have never seen anything like this before. They're treating it as an existential threat. More alarms joined the first as Space Station Unity itself began emergency procedures. Blast doors slammed shut throughout the structure, isolating different sections. Non-essential systems shut down and the defensive grid that protected the station activated for the first time in centuries, surrounding Unity in a web of protective energy. Station Unity is now at defense condition 1, announced the station's AI system. All non-military personnel please proceed immediately to designated emergency shelters. This is not a drill. Pax turned to Jack, her glowing eyes now blazing with intensity. Your ship has triggered every defensive system in this sector, she said, her voice strained. Every automated protocol, every AI threat assessment, every sensor array is screaming warnings. What exactly have you brought to this station? Jack remained remarkably composed amid the chaos that his ship's arrival had triggered. Exactly what I said, he replied calmly. A mid-sized battleship from Earth's defense fleet. I apologize for the alarm reactions. The Leviathan's passive sensor signature must be stronger than we anticipated when we calculated for this presentation. He tapped his wrist device again, opening a priority channel. Captain Lin, power down all offensive systems immediately and begin broadcasting peaceful intentions on all frequencies. I need you to look as non-threatening as possible right now. The response came quickly. Already done, Commander. We went to minimal power status as soon as we detected the defense grid activation. All weapons are cold, shields are at navigational minimum only, and we're broadcasting friendly identification codes on every channel we can access. We're also transmitting our full technical specifications to the station's system so they can verify we're not a threat. Slowly, very slowly, the alarms began to quiet as the various defense systems received the Leviathan's broadcasts and confirmed that the massive ship was not taking any hostile actions. One by one the alien vessels powered down their weapons, though their shields remained up at heightened levels. The station's blast doors reopened and the emergency lighting returned to normal, but the tension in the presentation chamber remained thick enough to cut with a knife. The 5 commanders had gathered together, speaking in urgent hushed tones. Their earlier confidence completely evaporated. Pax was the first to turn back to Jack. Your ship, she began, then paused as if unsure how to phrase what she wanted to ask. Just existing caused every military system in this sector to assume we were under attack. Yes, Jack acknowledged, that is admittedly more dramatic than we intended. The Leviathan is designed to be visible on purpose. We learned long ago that effective deterrence requires potential enemies to know exactly what they're facing, but perhaps we miscalibrated for just how sensitive your automated systems would be. Vex approached slowly, his 3 eyes wide and his skin still that pale, almost white blue. Commander Reynolds, he said carefully, I think I speak for everyone here when I say that we would very much like to understand what we're looking at. Would you be willing to explain? Jack nodded. Of course, Admiral, that's why we're here. He gestured to the holographic display where the Leviathan now hung in space, fully visible and utterly dominant. The HSS Leviathan is Earth's implementation of lessons learned from thousands of years of warfare. It incorporates every principle of effective military design that humanity has discovered, often through bitter experience. It is designed to fulfill multiple roles simultaneously: fleet defense, power projection, strategic deterrence, and rapid response to threats anywhere within a 50 light-year radius. Tora found her voice again. How many crew does something that size require? Thousands, tens of thousands. The Leviathan operates with a standard complement of 15,000 personnel, Jack replied, though it can function with a skeleton crew of as few as 500 in emergency situations through extensive automation. Every system has multiple redundancies and can be operated remotely from the bridge if necessary. 15,000. Grell rumbled in disbelief. My star shield requires only 2,000 crew and it's considered a large vessel. Different design philosophies, Jack said with a slight smile. We believe strongly in redundancy and human oversight of critical systems. We've learned through hard experience that fully automated systems can be hacked, compromised, or simply fail at critical moments. Having trained personnel available to take manual control of any system at any time is worth the additional resource investment. That philosophy extends through every aspect of the Leviathan's design. Mech had been silent, processing what He was seeing, but now he clicked his mandibles slowly, thoughtfully. And you said this is mid-sized, he asked, as if hoping he had misheard. Yes, Jack confirmed. We classify ships by role and capability rather than just size. The Leviathan is a cruiser, which in Earth's naval terminology means it's designed for independent operations away from fleet support for extended periods. We have smaller vessels for patrol and escort duties, and we have larger vessels for command and control functions or for carrying the fighter wings that support fleet actions. The implications of that statement hung heavy in the air. If this was mid-sized, then what did Earth's actual capital ships look like? With your permission, mediator and counsel, Jack said, turning to address the official representative. I would like to invite the 5 commanders aboard the Leviathan for a personal tour. It might help address concerns and give everyone a clearer understanding of what Earth has built. The mediator's silvery form rippled in what might have been surprise. You would allow foreign military leaders full access to your vessel? Its voice carried a note of disbelief that was unusual for the normally neutral arbiter. Of course, Jack replied, this is a military showcase. After all, the entire purpose is transparency and mutual understanding. Earth has nothing to hide from the galactic community. We came here to demonstrate our capabilities and to show that we're ready to be full partners in whatever comes next. That means being open about what we've built. The 5 commanders exchanged long looks of uncertainty mixed with undeniable curiosity. The chance to actually board and examine the human ship was almost irresistible despite the implied risks. Finally, Vex stepped forward, speaking for the group. I accept the invitation on behalf of the Azui Empire, he said formally. As do I, rumbled Grell. The Stone Confederation would know more about this vessel, and I mech clicked. Though the Hive Collective approaches this with appropriate caution, the Krell never refuse a chance to study potential adversaries. Tora added, her confidence beginning to return slightly. Or potential allies. The Lumra Concord accepts as well, Pax said softly, her glowing eyes fixed on Jack with that penetrating gaze that suggested she was reading far more than just his words. Excellent, Jack said. He tapped his wrist device again. Captain Lin prepared to receive visitors. We're bringing the 5 primary commanders aboard for a full tour. Please ensure all sections are ready for inspection and have the department head standing by to answer technical questions. Understood, Commander, Lin replied. We'll roll out the welcome mat. Looking forward to showing them what Earth engineering looks like up close. The journey to the Leviathan took longer than expected. What had appeared relatively close in the holographic display turned out to be much further away, another indication of the ship's true scale. Their shuttle, a sleek diplomatic craft provided by the station, traveled for nearly 20 minutes at sub-light speeds before the Leviathan truly dominated their view, completely blocking out the stars behind it like a dark wall extending to infinity in every direction. By the void, whispered Tora, pressing one of her hands against the shuttle viewport. Her red scales had paled slightly from this distance. We can see individual sections that are larger than my world breaker. It's not just big, it's incomprehensible. Our initial sensor readings had difficulty calculating its true dimensions, Jack explained from his seat. The whole material absorbs most active scanning waves, which makes accurate measurements challenging from a distance. You really only understand the scale when you get close enough for visual confirmation. Like now, the 5 commanders were pressed against the viewports, their earlier skepticism completely replaced by awe tinged with the first hints of real fear. This wasn't just a bigger ship, this was a fundamental shift in the scale of warfare, a vessel that existed in a category all its own, beyond anything their civilizations had conceived of as possible. The shuttle approached one of the Leviathan's many docking bays, and even that auxiliary bay was enormous, easily large enough to house any of the alien flagship vessels with room to spare. Inside the bay was a testament to military efficiency. Hundreds of smaller craft were arranged in perfect geometric rows, fighters, bombers, dropships, support vessels, all maintained in obvious ready status. Crews in dark blue uniforms moved with practiced efficiency, performing maintenance checks, running diagnostics, loading supplies, every movement purposeful and coordinated. When their shuttle touched down and the airlock cycled open, they were met by a woman in a captain's uniform with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of absolute competence. She saluted crisply as they disembarked. Welcome aboard the HSS Leviathan, she said, her voice carrying easily over the background noise of the busy hangar. I'm Captain Sarah Lynn, commanding officer of this vessel. Commander Reynolds has arranged for a complete tour of our primary systems. How many crew members does this ship require to operate effectively? Admiral Vex asked, immediately watching the dozens of humans moving about the bay with focused purpose. The Leviathan operates with a standard complement of 15,000 personnel, Captain Lin replied, walking as she talked, leading them toward the main corridor that would take them deeper into the ship. Though, as Commander Reynolds mentioned, we can function with significantly fewer in emergency situations through our automated backup systems. Our crew is organized into 3 8-hour shifts, which means we can maintain full operational status indefinitely without crew fatigue becoming a factor. 15,000 Grell rumbled, doing mental calculations. My star shield accomplishes similar functions with 2,000 different design philosophies, as the commander said. Captain Lin acknowledged with a polite nod. We favor redundancy and human judgment over pure automation. Every critical system has at least 3 independent control methods and can be operated manually if necessary. We found that technology fails, but well-trained personnel adapt. The tour began with the ship's primary bridge, a massive command center that occupied 3 full decks connected by open spaces that allowed sight lines between levels. Hundreds of workstations were arranged in concentric circles around a central command platform, each station dedicated to a specific ship function: operations, weapons, navigation, engineering, communications, damage control, and dozens of other specialties. The commanders had never seen so many personnel working in coordinated action in one space. Unlike the colorful holographic interfaces that dominated alien vessel controls, the human systems were straightforward and practical: physical buttons and switches alongside touchscreen displays, redundant manual overrides visible next to automated controls, everything designed with the clear philosophy that if one system failed, another would immediately be available. Your technology seems less advanced than I expected, Vex observed, studying a navigation console that looked almost primitive compared to the elegant holographic controls on the Shadow Strike. We favor reliability over impressive visuals, Captain Lin replied without taking offense. In combat, when your ship is being torn apart by weapons fire, you don't want to be trying to reconfigure holographic interfaces or hoping your gesture controls still work. You want physical switches and buttons that will function even if the rest of the system is damaged. Our interfaces are designed to be operated by someone wearing a full pressure suit. In zero gravity with half the bridge on fire if necessary, they continued deeper into the vessel, passing through corridors wide enough to drive vehicles through and seeing crew quarters that suggested the Leviathan was designed for very long deployments away from any support infrastructure. The medical facilities could have served as a planetary hospital. The recreational areas included what appeared to be parks with actual living plants, and the storage sections contained enough supplies to sustain the crew for years. This ship could remain operational for extended periods without resupply packs, noted, observing everything with her characteristic careful attention. 5 years is our standard deployment cycle, Jack confirmed, though we've never tested the absolute maximum duration. In theory, the Leviathan could remain in deep space indefinitely as long as we can harvest ice from comets for water and reaction mass. It was the engineering section that truly demonstrated the scale of power humanity had harnessed. 6 massive fusion reactors, each one larger than an entire alien vessel, dominated the primary engineering base, supplemented by 12 smaller secondary reactors distributed throughout the ship. Chief Engineer Park, a stocky man with graying hair and hands that showed decades of practical work, greeted them with obvious pride. These beauties produce enough power to run a small planetary colony, he said, patting one of the massive reactor housings. We could theoretically power 1 million people's worth of infrastructure just from our primary reactors alone. The secondaries are for redundancy and for peak power situations when we need to fire all weapons simultaneously or operate at maximum shield strength. The sheer inefficiency of it, Mech said, though his tone suggested reluctant admiration rather than criticism. You're using enough energy to power a civilization just to move one ship and to protect that ship and to power its weapons, Jack added with a slight smile. Earth learned long ago that in warfare there's no such thing as overkill, there's simply different levels of making absolutely certain your enemy cannot threaten you, and that requires power, lots of power. But it was the weapons control center that finally silenced all remaining doubts about human military capability. Row after row of weapons officers sat at their stations monitoring systems that represented the absolute cutting edge of destructive technology. Weapons Officer Rodriguez, a woman with sharp features and the bearing of someone who had seen combat, stood ready to explain each system with obvious technical knowledge and professional pride. Kinetic impact rail weapons, she said, indicating one entire section of the control center. These systems accelerate solid projectiles to 98% of light speed using magnetic acceleration. The projectiles are just tungsten rods, no explosive warheads necessary, because at that velocity the kinetic energy alone is sufficient to vaporize anything they hit. No shield can stop them because they're not energy weapons, they're solid matter moving fast enough to punch through anything. Plasma lance batteries. She continued, pointing to another section of the control center where officers monitored different readouts. These project streams of magnetically contained plasma at temperatures exceeding the surface of most stars. They can cut through capital ship armor like a knife through paper. We use them primarily for precision strikes against specific ship systems or for close-range combat where we need guaranteed penetration. Particle beam cannons, Rodriguez said, moving down the line. Electromagnetic pulse generators designed to disable enemy electronics at range. Quantum disruption torpedoes that destabilize the fundamental forces holding matter together on a subatomic level. Fusion warheads for area denial. And then there are these. She gestured to the largest displays where officers monitored massive cylindrical objects stored in specially reinforced sections of the ship. The 5 commanders leaned in to look at the technical specifications, their expressions growing increasingly horrified as they read. What are those? Tora asked, though her voice suggested she wasn't sure. She wanted to know. Nova bombs, Rodriguez replied, simply designed to replicate the explosion of a small supernova when detonated. Each one contains enough antimatter to destroy everything within a 10 million kilometer radius. We carry 12 of them. The silence that followed was profound, each alien commander processing the implications of weapons that could destroy not just ships or fleets but potentially sterilize entire regions of space. The Nova bombs represented destructive capability on a scale that seemed almost incomprehensible. Why? Pax finally asked, her glowing eyes dimmed to almost nothing, her voice carrying what sounded like genuine horror. Why build such weapons? What possible enemy would require this level of destructive capability? Jack's expression grew serious, and for the first time since they'd met him the 5 commanders saw something in his eyes that might have been old pain or old anger. Because we learned very early in our history that being unprepared for the worst possible threat can mean extinction, he said quietly. We built the Leviathan and ships like it not because we want war but because we never want to face an enemy we cannot defeat. If someone comes to our systems with hostile intent, we want them to look at what we have and decide that attacking humanity would cost more than they're willing to pay. We want overwhelming deterrent capability that makes war unthinkable. And if deterrence fails, Vex asked, what then? Then we want to be able to win, Jack said simply and completely and permanently. We don't believe in limited warfare or acceptable losses. We believe in total victory or complete defense. There's no middle ground when survival is at stake. As they returned to the shuttle bay to depart, the 5 commanders were noticeably subdued. Their earlier boasting seemed hollow now, their prized warships suddenly inadequate compared to what they had witnessed. There's one more thing you should know, Jack said as they prepared to board their shuttle for the return journey to the station. The Leviathan is one of 30 similar vessels currently in service with Earth's defense fleet. Vex's 3 eyes widened in shock. 30, he repeated weakly, his skin cycling through colors rapidly. Jack nodded. We take the defense of our species very seriously, Admiral, very seriously indeed. We have 6 ships of this class deployed in our home system at all times, with the others rotating through various sectors of human-controlled space. We also have approximately 200 smaller vessels ranging from frigate class to destroyer class, and we're currently constructing 12 new capital ships in our Jupiter orbital yards that will be larger than the Leviathan. As their shuttle departed carrying the 5 stunned commanders back toward Space Station Unity, Captain Lin stood beside Jack in the observation deck watching them go. Well, she said, that certainly made an impression. Do you think it was too much? Jack was quiet for a moment considering the question. No, he finally said, they needed to see what they're potentially dealing with, and more importantly they needed to understand that Earth isn't interested in being a junior partner or a protected species. We're offering alliance as equals, and sometimes equals need to demonstrate their capabilities clearly. Besides, he added with a slight smile, seeing is believing. They can doubt our words all they want, but they can't doubt what they've seen with their own eyes. Captain Lin nodded in agreement, then glanced at her commanding officer. Do you really think they'll accept us into the council after this? They might see us as too dangerous. Jack smiled. That's exactly why they'll accept us, he said, because now they understand the cost of having us as enemies versus the benefit of having us as allies. It's simple strategic mathematics. Back on Space Station Unity, the 5 alien commanders had immediately called an emergency private meeting in a secure conference room away from other delegates. This changes everything, Vex said, pacing back and forth, his 3 eyes blinking rapidly, his skin unable to settle on any one color as emotions cycled through him. If the humans have 30 ships with that capability, then they could potentially dominate the entire galactic center if they chose to, and yet they haven't. Tora pointed out, her 4 arms gesturing as she thought out loud. They've kept to their own systems, developed these weapons in secret, without threatening anyone. They revealed them now. Not as a threat but as a demonstration. They're not acting like conquerors, they're acting like a species that wants to be respected but not feared. The question is, what do they want? Mech asked, his mandibles clicking in agitated patterns. Why reveal all of this now? Why come to the summit at all? They could have remained isolated, continued building their fleet and eventually emerged as an unstoppable force. Instead they're here offering transparency. What's their goal? Pax had been silent throughout this exchange, her glowing eyes distant as she processed everything they had witnessed. Finally she spoke. I touched the ship, she said softly. When we were in the weapons control center I reached out with my abilities, trying to sense the emotional resonance of the place, trying to understand what drives the people who built such terrible weapons. The others stopped and turned to look at her. What did you find? Grell asked. And what did you sense? Pax met their gazes one by one. Fear, she said. Not fear of us or fear of any specific enemy, but a deep existential fear woven into the very structure of that ship. Fear of extinction, fear of helplessness, fear of being unprepared when the ultimate threat arrives. They built the Leviathan not out of aggression but out of terror of what might be out there in the dark spaces between stars. Species we haven't met yet, threats we haven't imagined yet. They're preparing for the worst-case scenario that keeps them awake at night. Tora rumbled thoughtfully. So they're not conquerors, they're survivors who learned to build weapons that could theoretically defeat anything. Precisely, Pax confirmed. And now they're here offering those weapons in service of the galactic community. They want to belong, they want allies, they want to be part of something larger than just defending their own systems, but they're making it clear that they'll only join as equals, not as subordinates. Vex stopped pacing and leaned against the conference table. The council will need to vote on whether to accept them as full members, he said, but after today I think the outcome is predetermined. Who would vote against having that kind of military capability on our side, and who would want to risk them remaining isolated and potentially hostile? Grell added, turning those weapons against anyone who threatened them in the future. The Stone Confederation will vote to accept them. It's the logical choice. The Hive Collective concurs. Mech clicked. We gain more by alliance than by exclusion. The Krell Dominion agrees. Tora rumbled, though I admit it pains me slightly to no longer have the largest battleship in known space. She gave a wry smile, but the World Breaker will serve well as part of an allied fleet alongside the Leviathan. The Azui Empire will vote to accept, Vex said formally, and the Lumra Concord as well. Pax finished, which means the 5 major powers are in agreement. The other council members will likely follow our lead, it's decided. Then 3 days later the formal vote was held in the Grand Assembly Hall of Space Station Unity. Representatives from every member species of the Galactic Council gathered to cast their votes on whether to accept Earth as a full member and whether to approve their proposed defensive alliance structure. The debate had been extensive, with some smaller species expressing concerns about the massive power imbalance that human technology represented, but in the end pragmatism won out. Commander Reynolds, Admiral Vex announced formally, standing at the central podium with the other 4 commanders flanking him. The Galactic Council has reached its decision by a vote of 42 species in favor, 3 opposed and 8 abstaining. Earth is hereby accepted as a full member of the Galactic Council with all rights, privileges and responsibilities that membership entails. Jack stood from his seat in the diplomatic section and walked to the center of the hall to polite applause that gradually grew stronger as he approached. Furthermore, Vex continued, your proposal for a defensive alliance has been approved with certain conditions that we believe will benefit all parties. Jack nodded. I'm listening. The conditions are as follows. Knowledge exchange, Mech explained, stepping forward, his mandibles clicking. Precisely, Earth will share certain military technologies with allied members in exchange for our advances in other fields, such as medicine, energy generation and exploration technology. We believe mutual technological advancement will strengthen the alliance as a whole. Earth accepts the condition, Jack said. We've always believed that rising tides lift all boats. Training programs, Tora added. Earth's military personnel will train alongside forces from other council members and vice versa. We will learn from your combat experience and you will learn from our specialized capabilities. This will build practical cooperation and mutual understanding beyond just political agreements. Earth strongly supports the condition, Jack replied. We believe joint training exercises will be invaluable for building trust and interoperability. Oversight committees, Grell rumbled. To ensure that the alliance serves all members equally and that no single species can abuse the combined military capability for their own ends, we propose a joint command structure for any alliance operations requiring council approval for major deployments. Earth finds that reasonable, Jack agreed, with one caveat. Our home defense forces remain under our sole command, as I'm sure each of your species reserves the right to defend their own territory. That's already included in the agreement. Structure Grell confirmed each member retains full sovereignty over their own system's cultural exchange. Pax finished speaking gently, her glowing eyes warm as she looked at Jack. Not just military cooperation but genuine understanding between our people, student exchanges, artistic collaboration, scientific partnerships. We want to build a real community, not just a military alliance. Earth enthusiastically accepts that condition, Jack said with genuine warmth. Finally, a condition that's actually pleasant to discuss. Then it is settled, the mediator announced, floating into the center of the hall, its silvery form reflecting the lights of the assembled delegates. The Galactic Defense Alliance is hereby formally established with Earth as a founding member alongside the 5 existing major powers. This is a historic moment that will be remembered for millennia to come. As the assembly broke into genuine applause, this time Jack found himself surrounded by the 5 commanders who had initially dismissed humanity so thoroughly. Admiral Vex extended one of his long-fingered hands in the human gesture of greeting that he had clearly researched. I must confess, Commander, when you first arrived I thought this summit would be an embarrassment for your species. I was profoundly wrong. Jack shook his hand firmly. Never judge a book by its cover, Admiral. Another Earth saying. Tora laughed, her booming voice echoing through the hall. You humans have a saying for everything, don't you? She extended one of her 4 hands for Jack to shake as well. I look forward to training exercises between our forces. I think my warriors will learn much from studying your approach to warfare, and I think they'll learn much from yours, Jack replied. The Krell reputation for ground combat is legendary. We could use that expertise. Mech approached, clicking his mandibles in what Jack had learned was the equivalent of a friendly greeting. The Hive Collective is eager to see how your drone technologies compare to our swarm systems, he said. Perhaps we can arrange a joint development program. I think that could be very productive, Jack agreed. Grell simply nodded, his stone-like face creasing in what might have been a smile. You've earned respect today, human, he rumbled. That's not easily done. The Stone Confederation will honor the alliance. But Pax's approach was different. She reached out and gently touched Jack's hand with her own, and he felt a brief sensation like a warm breeze across his mind. I wanted to say, she spoke softly, that what I sensed in your ship, the fear that drives you to such preparation, that's not weakness, it's wisdom, and I believe it will help protect all of us from threats we haven't yet imagined. Thank you, Admiral, Jack replied, meeting her glowing gaze. I hope we never need to use the weapons we've built, but I sleep better knowing they exist. That evening, as the Leviathan prepared to depart Space Station Unity to carry news of the successful alliance back to Earth, Jack stood in the ship's observation deck watching as the alien vessels moved into formation, not in challenge this time but as escort symbols of the new alliance that had been forged through demonstration of capability and mutual respect. Captain Lin joined him, looking out at the assembled fleet. We did it, she said quietly, not just joining the council but doing it as equals, as partners. Jack nodded. Humanity has come a long way from that first primitive rocket that barely made it to orbit, he said, and now we're standing alongside civilizations that have been exploring space for thousands of years. It's remarkable. But as he watched the stars whirl slowly past, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast and humanity's exploration of it had only scratched the surface. There were still unknown regions, still undiscovered threats, still challenges that would test this new alliance in ways none of them could predict. The Leviathan and her sister ships have been built to face those challenges, whatever they might be. Somewhere out in the darkness beyond the reach of any civilization's sensor, something stirred. Ancient, patient and hungry, it had watched the younger species play their games of diplomacy and power for eons, always waiting for the right moment to emerge and feed. But now there was something new in the galaxy, a species that had spent millennia preparing for war, a species that built weapons capable of cracking planets and carried bombs that could replicate stars, a species driven by the fundamental fear that somewhere in the dark something terrible was waiting, and for the first time in its ancient existence the thing in the darkness felt something unfamiliar. A slight hesitation, a moment of doubt. Perhaps these new creatures with their terrible weapons and their paranoid preparations, perhaps they might actually be ready. Perhaps attacking them would not be the easy meal it had expected, and so it waited, watching, learning, calculating, because if the humans had taught the galaxy anything it was that patient preparation and overwhelming force could change the balance of power, and in the cold mathematics of survival that was a lesson worth learning. The 5 alien commanders who had once boasted about their battleships now stood alongside the humans whose ship had humbled them all, but there was no resentment in their alliance, no bitterness, only mutual respect forged through honest demonstration of capability and the beginning of genuine friendship built on shared understanding. The galaxy was changing, and the species that had arrived late to the stars had brought with them something unexpected, not just overwhelming weapons, But a perspective shaped by countless conflicts and tempered by hard-won wisdom. They had learned through bitter experience that the price of peace was eternal vigilance and the cost of survival was never being the weakest power in the room. And now that wisdom, that paranoid careful preparation, that absolute refusal to ever be helpless again was being shared with their new allies, because humanity had learned one final lesson in their long, violent history: that survival was better when you didn't face the darkness alone. And as the ships of the new Galactic Defense Alliance moved together through the stars heading toward their respective home systems to begin the work of integration and cooperation, the message was clear to anyone watching: the galaxy had new guardians and they were ready for whatever came next.